What's going on, guys? MariK here, back with the final part of our history of the Dragon Ball Super card game mini-series. It dragged on a little bit longer than I wanted to, mainly because set 6 took so long and I had to split it up into multiple parts. This is going to be one final part. If you guys want us to do more videos of this kind of nature, let me know in the comments below. The last episode is going to be about the special anniversary box, and this was kind of a take on the Ultimate box that came out at the 1-year anniversary of the game, which also gave us, older cards to support older archetypes, although they didn't really help as much as they kind of looked like they would have. It was support for older archetypes like Zamasu and stuff from set 1 and 2, but didn't really help the decks get anywhere, whereas the stuff in the special anniversary box, on the other hand, gave us fantastic cards that actually took those old decks, took some of those old strategies, and actually made them somewhat viable, at least on the level of locals, although some of them can actually be usable in the competitive meta today. Starting off with red, we got one of my favorite cards that came out of this set, was Innocence Cannon Majin Buu. This is a fantastic Majin Buu card that really speeds up the Union Absorb process for the older Majin Buu stuff. He's only a 2 cost, so you can play him super early. If your leader is Babidi or a Majin Buu, then you can use him to counterattack, meaning you can actually play him to stop your opponent from doing any of their shit. And when you play this card, you can choose a battle card and minus 5,000 power for the duration of the turn. So if you play it on your turn, you can KO something they have. If you play it in response to the counterattack, you can potentially KO something they might have, or at least weaken it to prevent it from doing any damage or being able to KO any battle cards. The reason why this card is so good for Majin Buu decks is because it is a red Majin Buu. Previously, the cheapest red Majin Buu we had that you could Union Absorb the 5-drop Majin Buu from Union Force on was the 3-drop from the Tournament of Power. Well, this now gives you a 2-drop. This also gives you an insane amount of flexibility with the deck as well, because you can play it to counter an attack, you can play it by hard casting it, or if you wanted to really get cheeky with it, you could play it in a Shenron deck via the new Wish card that we got, Assembling the Squad. Just pull it straight out of the deck with the Wish ability, and then if you're already awakened and you used the Shenron's ability to play it for free, then turn 2 you can go into the Awakening Evil Majin Buu, you can go into the Full of Energy, you could go right out into Rampant Evil, Grand Evil Absorption, go all the way up to Ultimate Evil. There's just so many options that you could play. You could even, if you wanted to, go with the Arcane Absorption and do the whole Agent of Destruction thing. This card here was a really, really good card for Majin Buu fans like myself, and really gave us an extra step to being able to get out our boss cards 1 turn sooner, although not really sure that we needed it, but we really do appreciate it. Then for all of us Vegito fans, we had the Polymorphic Potara. This was a really good card for Vegito decks. The only downside was you had to have a Vegito leader, and the green Vegito leader was struggling for a while. The original Vegito leader in Union Force still had a lot of flexibility. I still really enjoyed playing that leader, so that's kind of what I used with this one. But then with set 7, we got the blue Vegito leader with that archetype. So we had 3 different leaders that we could use this card with. And just for 1 energy, being able to bring out a Goku and a Vegeta that you can fusion into, it was a really powerful ability. Now, you just had to place him in the drop area from your hand, so you didn't even have to play him, anything like that. It made it really easy to, turn 2 to 3, just go into your fusion cards early on. And if you played this along with the Vegito leader in set 7, then you had not only this card to be able to cheat out a Goku and a Vegeta, but you also had the leader's ability to, once per game, play a Goku and a Vegeta for free, meaning multiple turns in a row you could play Vegito battle cards. And since you're having to use the Vegito leader, if you played Hyper Rush, which was the best Vegito fusion there is, then you could easily be able to get that effect off multiple times, rip cards out of your opponent's hand over and over again, help yourself draw cards as well, and even awaken if you're not already at that point. Almighty Technique Vados, on the other hand, was probably the most used card from the anniversary box from Red, just right out the gate, because this card, you can play it on turn 2, and you had to awaken your Champa or Vados leader, even if you had 4 or more life. And being able to awaken a leader on turn 2 is a really powerful ability, as we've seen with Shenron decks. And with the Vados leader, it kind of wasn't as detrimental, but with the Champa leader, being able to give whatever double strike so early on it was a really, really strong ability. For a little while, people were using it, and you could see that it did put in work, but a buddy of mine even tried to play it, and he just wasn't satisfied with the way it played. I think, for the most part, it's because of the way people were building the deck. I have my own reservations about it, but I feel like this card right here can make the Champa leader viable. You just have to build a deck that can take advantage of the leader's abilities instead of trying to make the leader fit to a certain deck, and I think that's part of the problem people were having with it. Then we had Trunks' Surge of Energy. This was a really good card for Pan players, although Pan kind of seemed to have fallen off of the wagon a little bit. Not a lot of people played Pan at all that I have seen in quite a while. I know there's a few people that are still like diehard Pan fans, but even then I haven't seen them actually play the deck at all. The reason this card is so good is because when you play it and it gets increased, you draw a card. So you would draw a card from its ability, and you would draw a card from Pan's ability. So that's +2 right there. He's 20,000 for that turn. You could bring him out with GT Spaceship. You could bring him out with assembling the squad. Like, there's a lot of ways to just play this card just straight from your deck to be able to play it early on. And then that's also an early evolution target for Chain Attack Trunks if you were one of those people that go that route. Solid card. Decent abilities. I feel like people just aren't running the Pan leader, whether it's because there's just not a legitimate reason to play her over other decks, or she just can't handle going up against the current state of the meta at the moment. Then we had another Universe 6 card. It was Hit Space-Time Transcended. This was a card that was really good for people wanting to play with the evolution hit, the lightning speed from set 1, that when you played it, you burned your opponent for 2. Now, the only problem with this card is that he has 0 protection whatsoever. So you're going to play him for 3 energy, and then his activate main costs 3 energy. And you can play the 6-drop hit from your drop or warp area. So you didn't have to play it just from the deck, which was really nice. But my problem with it is, while we had 2 other hit promos that were really good for, keeping him around for the evolution, this one is just not. I mean, the only upside is that, he lets you get him out for less energy, but the other 2 keep themselves alive because they can constantly warp themselves out of play so your opponent can't touch them. And then they come back to be able to evolve them. This one just lets you evolve him for a much cheaper amount, but the only way you can make that viable is if you can guarantee that he's not going to get KO'd. Otherwise, your only option would be to play him and then do the activate main ability in the same turn, which is not nearly as viable, but, so it was a decent card. I liked what they were trying to do with it to give it the old hit a little bit more playable value, but overall I feel like him not having any way to protect himself is what made this card not see a whole lot of play. Machine Mutants also got a little bit of love with this set in General Rildo, Leader of Planet M2, and Mutant Genesis. Mutant Genesis was the 1-cost activate battle that if your leader was Dr. Mew, you gained plus 15,000 power, and then you got to choose a Machine Mutant with energy cost of 2 or less and play it. So it gave you some extra offense and defense. It gave you another way to play your Machine Mutants, which triggered their abilities, to be able to get out the counterparts a lot faster so that you could use them for their various evolutions. The General Rildo, on the other hand, for 1 red energy, you got to choose the Nat, Bizu, and Ribbit, your hand or battle area, put him in the drop, play this card. So you played him for 1 energy. And when you played him, if your leader was Machine Mutant, you got to choose an M2 from your deck and activate it. Not terrible, but what made this crazy is you played him for 1 energy, and then you could EX evolve him into the 7-drop that came out of Crossworlds for 1 more energy, which is pretty wild considering that one comes out and reduces the battle power of all of your battle cards, unless they have barrier, of course. But super solid card, super solid strategy for M2, for Dr. Mew and M2. But unfortunately, Machine Mutants don't really have a whole lot going for them after that. Like, the Rildo's great when he comes into play, and, you know, he gets to reduce all their shit, but Machine Mutants, I'm not sure if it's just because the deck is slower, or if it's just because it doesn't have a whole lot of options, because Red's got a lot of options now to be able to counter just about everything going on. Red has gotten so much good support over the past few sets that I honestly almost want to try and build an M2 or a Dr. Mew deck and see if I can find a way to make this stuff more viable than it actually is. Moving on to blue, we have 3 of my absolutely favorite cards that came out of this expansion. And honestly, these 3 cards are fantastic cards. Even if you're not fans of the character or the playstyle, what they do for their decks is so detrimental. It is such great support that you really can't ignore it. And with the release of Assault of the Saiyans and how these cards support those decks even further, absolutely just insane. The Plan for Destruction extra card gives your leader 10,000 power and allows you to add another card to your drop, add another card to your energy area. This card, and so you're defending yourself. You're adding cards to your energy. You're ramping yourself up, which with the new leader and the new support is only helping you out because you're ramping your opponent as well, so you can go ahead and hit them for that neg-4 with the leader's ability. The Countdown to Destruction Goku Black fuels that ability even further because he not only gives you a Goku Black to Union Potara, but you can play him for free when you have 5 or more energy. And you also get to draw a card when you play him because your leader is going to be Goku Black or Zamasu. These cards were already great just for the decks that they played in general, because they helped you. Let's take a step back from Assault of the Saiyans. We'll look at the original decks. Original Zamasu, original Goku Black. Obviously, the original Zamasu wanted to ramp up so he could get up to 7 energy to be able to union into the 10 drop and start chipping away at your opponent. Same thing with the Goku Black. You wanted to ramp up and get that extra energy, but Countdown for Destruction Goku Black was so detrimental for that deck because it allowed you to hit 6 energy. You just had to hit 6. You could use your leader's ability, throw in that 7th one, awaken, play this Goku for free because you're past 5 energy, and then you can use those 7 energy to evolve him into Unstoppable Despair and rip away your opponent's energy. This card here, Countdown for Destruction, made Goku Black so much more fun to play, because before you were having to get a Goku Black on the board and find a way to be able to evolve him. That led us to having to use Joyful Strike, which, not a terrible card, but the fact that you had to hit yourself for 2 life kind of made it a little bit harder to play, because if your opponent was going more aggressive and you weren't able to keep up with it, then you couldn't really afford those 2 extra life cards. But with the inclusion of the new Zamasu blocker for Goku Black, that made it a little easier to handle that as well. So these cards got insane support. Then we had the Fuse Zamasu, who allowed you to awaken your Fuse Zamasu leader even at 3 or more life. Now, the reason I wouldn't want to do this is there's a few reasons. One, you want to take that extra damage because you want to get those cards from your life. If you don't, they're going to stay there the rest of the game because his awakened ability isn't optional. You can't choose to take the damage or mill from the top of your deck. You have to mill the cards from the top of your deck. So you want to get as many of those cards as you can, but the sooner you awaken, then the sooner you're going to start milling cards, and you're going to run out of cards a lot faster that way. So I'm not a big fan of that ability. However, the activate main, where you can place him in the drop area for 2 blue energy and get out the 10 drop Zamasu, is an absolute godsend. When I did my video, when I did the reveal video for this set, and that card came out, I literally said, scoop up SPR Zamasus. They are going to spike. They were like $6 at the time. I only had one, and I'm like, okay, I did the video and everything. I went to work. I even went to order this stuff on my lunch break because I didn't have the time between getting the video uploaded and going to work in that morning. Everywhere's already sold out. Already sold out, and I'm like, fuck. So then, when places started selling them again, they're like $20 a piece. I'm like, well, I told you guys, I knew it was happening, and I unfortunately wasn't able to do anything about it. But I've got one that I've had since forever, so I'm not really that worried about it. But all in all, these are the 3, in my opinion, the 3 best cards that came out of this box, and that's not just because I'm biased. Then on the subject of more support for gods, we got a new Whis, Destruction's Aid. He was a 1 cost, you got to play him, draw a card. And then for 2 blue energy, if your leader was a blue Beerus, you got to put him in your energy in rest mode. Fantastic card for the Beerus leader. The only thing is, I hate that you had to pay 2 energy to put him there. It's kind of like he was kind of like an objection that didn't cost you an extra card to lose, if that makes sense. Whereas objection, you had to play objection, but then you also had to choose a card in your hand to put it in your energy. Whereas the Whis just puts himself there, so you weren't losing a card like that. But I also found there was an easier way to get him to your energy anyways. With my Beerus deck, and I'll have the video up for it soon, hopefully, I prefer playing him, playing some others, and then you can go with Grand Priest to get him into your energy area. That's using your head. Fantastic card for Beerus, but unfortunately the Beerus leader is still just kind of lacking. I feel like, I feel like if you're not objectioning turn 2, or getting to put him in your energy turn 2, so that your Beerus can start attacking and getting his auto off to KO battle cards, then you're going to end up falling behind quickly, because that's pretty much the only thing that leader is good at. Then we have the Goku Path to the Infinite. This card could have been such a fantastic card, and it's still not a bad card by any means. For 1 energy, your leader is blue, and you choose a blue card, energy cost 4, return it back to your hand, you can play him. That allows you to then go into, EX evolving him into cards like Ultimate Spirit Bomb, or the Ultra Instinct Sun Goku. The thing that hurts this card for me is the fact that he has to have a blue leader. A lot of people don't really run blue leaders unless they're running for a specific archetype. So blue leaders kind of fall behind there. So this card's usability is not as great as it could be. If it didn't have that restriction, I'd be running it with the Fusion Warrior Vegito, because then you could have any of your cards would count as blue. You could easily get out cards a lot faster that way. Then you play this Goku, and then you could play any of the other EX Evolve cards on it. Still a solid card to kind of help yourself get up to that point, but I don't think it was good enough to kind of convince anybody that it was worth playing over any of the stuff that is competitively viable right now. Then we had Vegeta Energy Absorber. This was a card that on paper it seemed like it was a really good card, but in practice it just, it didn't seem like it was as viable in my opinion. When your energy was switched from rest mode to active mode by a skill, if it was your opponent's turn, you had to draw a card. Now, it only being once per turn, to me that kind of is part of what made the card not as playable, but you're having to switch energy on your opponent's turn. So, outside of stuff like Sensu Bean, or Dimension Magic, Whis' Coercion, there's not a lot of things that are switching energy to active mode. If it switched it on your turn, or if it didn't care whose turn it was, it would have a better ability. It would have a little bit more usability, but for now it's just kind of one of those cards that you might think about using in the near future as we get more cards to untap. But there's a dangerous strategy there when you've got all the energy haters like Borgos and Whis, and then you've got Dende and Lord forbid the freaking Black TN card. We also got a new Future Trunks card with Hope Renewed, but again, this is one of those cards that it just didn't seem to have a whole lot of usage. If it had another ability, or even if it had like critical or double strike or something, I would see, use in it, but otherwise it's just a 2-cost 15k, but the Activate Battle allows you to put it at the bottom of your deck if your leader is blue, and it's your opponent's turn. You get to choose one of your blue energy, switch it to active mode. That's a lot to have to do just for one energy. And you're playing him for 2 energy anyway, so what's the point? Like, what are you doing with him? It feels like it's a waste of a turn. It's a waste of energy just to play him. Again, if he had another ability, that would be one thing, but I can't understand why you would. And not to mention, it's Activate Battle. So you're past the counter step. So even if you use this, then you're not negating the first attack or doing anything with any counters on that first attack because you're having to wait till Activate Battle to be able to trigger this. So to me, I don't know, it just doesn't seem worth running, and that's coming from a hardcore, diehard Future Trunks player. Every time we get Future Trunks support, I am always trying to find out a way to play it, and this could have been an awesome card. Sadly, it's just not. As if they had realized that the green Vegito leader that they made and the subsequent support for it kind of sucked. They gave us a new extra card in Blazing Technique. It was an Activate Battle for the green Vegito that gave him 15,000 power and lets you KO a battle card 4 or less, or KO a battle card with Barrier, ignoring it, of 2 or less. Super awesome card. Fantastic, just because for this leader, you can get around like weaker cards with Barrier with it, without having to run cards like the 2-drop green Krillin. And this costs 1 and gives you extra offensive and defensive power as well. And to be able to KO 4 drops for 1 energy, that's not bad either. Like, this is a really solid card for that leader. Unfortunately, the event pack Vegito still kind of sucks because you have to be awakened to be able to use it. But there are ways now to awaken fairly early in the game to make it viable. And I think this is a perfect card to be able to help out with that, because once you're awakened, you want your opponent to have no battle cards so that you can trigger his abilities, and this is a very cheap and effective way to reach that goal. If that wasn't enough, we also got a new green Goku card that, first of all, gives us just generic green support in general, but also is a Goku that you could run, a green Goku you could run with that green Vegito leader. Since the event pack Vegito requires 3 green energy to play, you're going to be playing nothing but green cards. This lets you KO any green battle card with Barrier 3 or less. So this hits things that the extra card Blazing Technique cannot hit. Basically, your whole goal with that is to just get everything your opponent plays off the board. Leave nothing left alive. And with the green counter cards that we got between Preemptive Strike and whatever Saiyan technique that came in Assault of the Saiyans, like we've got some fantastic green support that keeps shit off the board with all these counters and such. You could also, if you're going to run multicolor, then you could run the Vegeta counterplay as well for 2 energy, and just every turn you're KOing stuff, and you're setting up Goku and Vegetas for that Union Batara as well. Super solid card, but again, this card can be used with any deck that plays green, as long as you're playing enough to meet that 2 specified energy cost. For fans of Super Saiyan 2 Gohan and the Cell Saga, we got Son Gohan Display of Strength. This was a super fantastic card. First of all, the art is already amazing. In a foil version, it's just drop-dead gorgeous. But this card lets you not only draw 2 cards when you played him, but if your leader was green, just if your leader was green, didn't matter what green leader you had, you could play a Super Saiyan 2 Son Gohan from your hand on top of him. So, no evolution cost, you got to play it for 4, and then you could just start going ham with that card. And it was a really cheap and easy way to get this card out. People even started running this with Piercing Gohan and the Secret Rare Agent of Destruction Broly, and it got out of hand. You don't see it a whole lot. I don't really know that it's competitively viable, but it was definitely a deck that saw some play, saw a good bit of mention here and there. I've seen it around, but still a super solid card to be able to allow you to play some of those bigger, higher cost cards that came out in the earlier sets, and still allow you to have a decent chance of, keeping up with what is currently available. The fact that when you play him you draw 2 cards is what really makes him solid, on top of being able to evolve him for no cost. For fans of the Clash of Fate Goku deck, or fans of Krillin, or fans that like to watch Krillin die over and over again, we got a new Krillin card in Calling for Help. He's a 1-cost, 4,000 power. If your leader is the Green Sun Goku and you are awakened, you increase energy cost in all areas by 3, and he gains blocker. And you draw a card when you play him as well. So if you are awakened, you could play him for 1 energy, draw that card, boom, he's now a 4-cost with blocker, which can trigger the Goku's ability. And this is a solid card. Really solid card that came out of this. I feel like that the Goku leader is not a terrible leader, especially when you can combine it with Feet Kamehameha to do some decent crit damage as well. We've got plenty of Krillin support. You got several ways to get out that Goku now, who comes out for free and just blows up anything he feels like it. It's a really solid, entertaining deck to play. There's so many viable options now of what can be played. Not all of it's going to be tier 1 or even 1.5, but we've got a lot of cards that can make decks a good solid tier 2, maybe even as low as 2.5, but a lot of these cards are really good cards that give us fantastic support that kind of takes a deck that was already playable and gives it just a little push to make it a bit better. 2 such cards that add onto that and make older decks a little bit more viable were Android 13, the Brilliant, and Android Troop 14 and 15. Here's why these cards actually make the deck a little bit more playable. 14 and 15 counts as 14 and 15. Activate Main lets you play it in your drop area to draw a card from your hand. So you don't even have to play him. You just discard a card, you get to draw a card. He just goes. You don't even have to worry about comboing him, milling him, nothing like that. Android 13 has Union Absorb. You get to choose a 14 and 15, which the Android Troop counted as both from your drop area. Put it under him. If your leader was an Android, you got to get the 7-drop Android 13 and play it on top of him. The only thing is you can't play the Brilliant if there was already Android 13 in your battle area. So you can only play one at a time, but this lets you play him at turn 3. Whereas the old Android 13 support, you had to wait until turn 4. The Android 13 was a 4-drop. So this lets you play the 7-drop a turn early. It gives you a card that is both 14 and 15 for the Union Absorb. It's super solid support for older archetypes, and I'm actually, more sad that we didn't get support for the good androids, being 17, 18 versus 13, 14, and 15, but any support to see for older archetypes that make them more viable is always going to be welcome for this game. For fans who wanted to play the OG Broly instead of the new Broly BR, we had Paragus Quelling the Beast. This is basically a Paragus that more or less replaced the Caulifla from Crossworlds that you could play and protect your battle cards from your leader's ability. I don't really think it was necessary, but it was another option. Now this one, you got to draw a card when you played him, but the Caulifla, the Ambitious, or Ambition, or whatever it was, you took a card from life, so you're getting a card either way. That card had 20,000 power, where this one only has 10,000 power. So personally, I feel like the Caulifla was still a little bit better. However, the Caulifla you would not want to play later on in the game, but I also feel like at that point, it really doesn't matter one way or the other, because if it's that late in the game that you're worried about taking the damage from your life, from her ability, you probably weren't going to care one way or the other about blowing up one of your battle cards with the leader's ability. Just my personal thought, it's a nice card and all, but I don't feel like it's a necessary card. Maybe a 2 of at most, but I don't think it's something that is detrimental to the strategy of the OG Broly deck. Yellow gave us some really solid support, even some generic cards like Bardock the Enlightened. Anytime one of your opponent's cards would switch from active mode to rest mode by one of your skills, you got to draw a card. And there's a lot of cards, especially in yellow, that put your opponent's cards in rest mode, whether it be cards like the Bojack stuff or the old yellow Saiyan stuff. Like, there's a lot of options for this card, and I feel like this is a very viable card to run. It being once per turn kind of sucks, but at the same time, you're like, well, okay, you could kind of abuse it. But I feel like the excuse of, well, it could be abused doesn't really apply as much when you've got much stronger cards that get abused in the game, other than, a card that's going to let you draw one card for meeting a certain requirement in abilities being played. Still a super solid card for Saiyans, for Bardock in general, and I love the card art overall. Anything Bardock, I'm more than happy to get new stuff for. We also got some more Kid Goku support, which is kind of nice, with Son Goku, Unbreakable Will. He was a 5k blocker. When he was KO'd, you got to choose one of your opponent's battle cards, switch it to rest mode, then choose a yellow Son Goku from your hand with an energy cost of 3 and play it. So, you play him for 2, let him block anything, he dies, and you bring out a Son Goku, energy cost of 3, and if you put a card in rest mode with his ability, you could easily bring out the Kid Goku Super Rare from Crossworlds that KO'd a battle card in rest mode and was a barrier blocker in his own right that also switched to active mode. Like, it was really cool to see Son Goku, like, childhood support that actually played off of existing support we had. And it was another card that would also allow you to play the yellow extra card from the World Tournament set that let you draw 2 cards when you had a Son Goku childhood in play. Like, is it viable in any kind of competitive environment? Maybe. Probably not. But it's certainly fun to be able to take cards like that that kind of all bounce off of each other and just string together some combos to chain them all together and get some extra draw power out of them, get some extra plays, some extra KOs. Just, I don't know, super. I like being able to see decks that can have cards that play off of each other instead of cards that all just take advantage of like 1 or 2 abilities like with the Shenron decks. It's just the creativity of stuff like this is something I really enjoy seeing in this game, and I think cards like this or cards like those that we've seen that do similar things are Bandai taking the game in the right direction. We also got some more Captain Ginyu support, which, if you guys saw my video this morning on the reveal for Yellow in the Draft Box 4, I am super, super excited for the new Captain Ginyu. This one here, Helix Strike, he's got Double Strike for 20k, which is not bad at all, but his Activate main is kind of where his ability is at. You place him in your drop area, you lead his Ginyu, you can look at top 3 cards of your deck, choose a Ginyu Force, add it to your hand, and then if you added a card, you can choose a Ginyu card from your hand and play it. Now, I'm still of the mindset that you can find a way to link, to kind of mesh the red and yellow Ginyu Force cards. I don't know how viable it actually can be. I have to take a step back and take another look at it. I built one of those before. I'm pretty sure I profiled it. You guys can find it way back with the release of Clash of Fates. But while this is good for the yellow stuff in general, you can only play Ginyu Force cards at energy cost of 2 or less from his ability. So you're not playing Jace from set 1. You can play Birder or Raccoon, but they're not that great. Goldo, you wouldn't want to play him off of that ability because it's a waste since he's a 1-drop. So, like, I feel like he suits the red ones better because they're all 2-drops, they all get abilities when you play them, but then you're also having to play them off the yellow Ginyu leader. And it's kind of like, it's almost like Bandai is encouraging us to mix the colors and find a way to make a red-yellow Ginyu deck work. It's just, it's difficult to do because you have to balance the cards out, and you can't have yellow battle cards in play when you play the red ones. Kind of forcing you to use them to combo, just for combo fodder, or use their abilities just once, and just after that be done with them. Then we had Frieza Malicious Strike. You know, initially when this card was revealed, I thought, oh, this might be a card you can take advantage of in like the Frieza Wish decks with the Frieza Wish leader, but as I started looking at it more and more, it being a 2-cost is what really holds the card back. Because when he's placed in the drop area from the battle area, you add a card from your life to your hand, and you choose a Frieza energy cost of 2 or less, other than himself, and play it. But I feel like if you're playing a battle card, a Frieza battle card for 2 energy, you're better off playing, what was it, military leader or military tactician, whatever. The 2-drop blocker that was 10k that said if he's KO'd, then you can play a 3-drop from your hand. It just seemed to fit better. The only thing this is doing is you could get it out with Frieza's Call, and it's going to come out in rest mode. Maybe they'll kill it. But then at the same time, you could do the exact same thing with that other Frieza, because he's also a 2-drop, and he's got blocker as well, and then have him come out, and he's going to bring out a 3-drop instead of another 2-drop. So, while this card it wasn't terrible, it just kind of feels like it's, overshadowed by the 2-drop Frieza cards that we already had. I couldn't find a reason to even fit this into my Frieza Wish deck, let alone in any other deck that I would play. And it's almost as though Bandai was trying to hint at us that they were going to be getting rid of the Battering Laser when they revealed Swift Retaliation Cooler. He's a counter that negates a counter card and plays himself as a 15k. But he costs 3 yellow energy as opposed to Battering Laser's 1. Now the upside to him is you get to draw a card when you play him, and if you have 6 or more cards in rest mode, you get to draw a second card. So it gives you a good bit of incentive to do like a yellow control deck so that you have these cards, but it's something you're going to want to play later on. But you're also going to want to play it when you're trying to go for the kill, because you want to be able to have it to negate those counter cards. It's just 3 energy is really steep, so ideally it's almost like your best bet is if you're going for something huge like the 7-drop Mira. You're going to chomp a double strike, that's 2 energy there, and then you have 3 yellow energy to negate their counter attack with Swift Retaliation Cooler, and hope that's enough for game. If not, then you've got the Cooler that you could swing with and just combo everything into that final attack. Super solid card, and I feel like counter, I feel like it's a little more balanced this way with it costing more than just 1 card to discard and 1 energy. 3 energy versus 1 energy is a huge difference. Then for those of us Cooler fans, we got not 1 but 2 new support cards for the deck in Meta Cooler Core Ultimate Form and Malevolent Revenge. Let's go ahead and touch on Malevolent Revenge first, because this was the more controversial card. It's your 1-cost activate battle for Meta Cooler, but it's if your leader is a Meta Cooler. That means your leader has to be non-awakened. If you awaken, your leader becomes Meta Cooler Core and is no longer a viable target for this card. The plus 15,000 power, the same as all the others, but then you can choose a Big Getty Star in your battle area, switch it to active mode, and switch 1 of your yellow energy. So it kind of allows you can chain this with Big Getty Star and kind of loop them together to keep getting out more Meta Coolers. Super neat ability, but really hindered by the fact that you can't be awakened when you play it. And since the Meta Cooler support actually has a card that lets you awaken earlier, or without being at 4 life, it kind of hinders the value of this card in the deck. With the other card, Meta Cooler Core Ultimate Form, that card's a pretty solid card, and kind of goes along with helping you awaken as well. Because when you play him, you get to draw a card, you get to choose a Big Getty Star and activate it, and then for 2 yellow energy, you can put him in the drop area to allow your leader to awaken even if you have 5 or more life. Or you can choose a card in your hand, place it in the drop area, and choose 2 infinite multiplication Meta Coolers in your drop area and play them. So it allows you to just start swarming with all these little Meta Coolers and stuff. But again, you have to choose between whether or not you want to spam that extra card or whether or not you want to awaken your leader as fast as possible. I can see the benefits to both of them, but I guess it's at that point it's kind of on a turn-by-turn play. It should have just been for the character Meta Cooler instead of it being Meta Cooler as the... You know what I mean. Like, you should have been able to use that on either side. With Meta Cooler in its card name. There you go. I don't know why they did it the way they did. We were kind of hoping Bandai would notice it and be like, whoa, that's not how it's supposed to be, and they would kind of have a an errata on the website. But then they were like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. That's how we're going to leave it. And you're like, why? Like, what's the purpose of this? But, you know, to each their own, I guess. Super solid cards if you wanted to run Metacooler. Is enough to make Metacooler viable? No. Is it enough to make them a little more fun to play? Absolutely. And you just keep shitting out little Metacoolers over and over and over again. I mean, what's not fun about that? Just swarming the board and hoping your opponent isn't smart enough to side deck Kami. We also got some fantastic support for the Mass Saiyan archetype, and depending on how you wanted to play it, you had a little bit of variety here. The biggest one being a crack in space-time. It was your activate battle for Black Mass Saiyan, specifically for Black Saiyan cards, but they get plus 15,000 power and double strike. So obviously you want to use that with Mass Saiyan because he can get crit, and then you've got double strike, and you've got, 25, 30, 35,000 double strike crit damage before you're comboing, and that's a lot thrown at your opponent. Super solid card. Fantastic art. Then you've got two other cards as well. We got Bardock, Awakened Instinct. He lets you draw 2 cards for no energy, and then you had to place one of them in the drop area. But if you had a card that was doing no good for you at that point, you may as well. And then it's 20,000 power beater that can just hopefully KO a battle card, if nothing else, get a little extra damage in. The Mass Saiyan Beguiled Warrior, on the other hand, was kind of like for the opposite end of this spectrum, lending support to Mass Saiyan cards in general. You play him for 1 energy, and when you overwhelmed him, you got to choose a masked battle card in your hand, 5 or less, and play it. Now, the downside to that is most of the good Mass Saiyan cards require you to play them with Overwhelm to trigger their abilities. There are a few options that you could use with this card that make it somewhat better, though. One of them being the Mass Saiyan that came out of the starter deck. He had his ability allowed you to reduce the energy cost if you had so many cards, whatever. But when you played him, he could attack battle cards in active mode. Pretty solid ability to have, and pretty good option to play him for free or play 2 cards for 1 energy. But having most of the Mass Saiyan options that have them require to be played via Overwhelm to get their abilities kind of really hurt this card, and I don't really think either of them are played in the current iterations of Mass Saiyan. But Space Time, on the other hand, is almost like a necessity for the deck to run 4 of, just because you could use the leader to push so much damage in, and then you've got other options as well to be able to add to that damage without having to use too much energy to make it there. Supreme Kai of Time was another fantastic addition to black decks. 1-cost counterplay that said battle cards at energy cost of 2 less could not attack until the start of your opponent's next turn. So if you played it in response to them playing something, and if it's early enough on, they're not going to be able to attack aside from using their leader. And that's a pretty big disruption to a lot of strategies for certain decks. And then when you played her, she replaced herself by letting you draw a card as well. That's really just a really solid card. Obviously, it's not as great later on in the game, but being able to use it early on to kind of get the upper hand, and if they played something, you could get a chance to KO it before they can attack with it, or really use it for whatever purpose they played it for. Just, I like this card. I feel like if you have room for it, there's no reason not to play it. It could almost be kind of like a staple in other decks as well, but I feel like just because right now Control hasn't really become a thing yet, despite the fact that Set 7 has been out, more people are still running older decks and not fully utilizing all these new cards that we've gotten with Set 7 to actually start building real Control decks. Although part of that, with time constraints and tournaments and stuff, is not really viable, but the Control as a deck itself is a real thing. Then we got some extra Demigra support. This one basically gave you Wormhole for the turn, although you could use it to put a Demigra energy cost of 4 from your warp and play it on top of him. I feel like it gave you the option of being able to overwhelm for a second turn while giving you a target to get out the 4-drop onto. It's not super viable, it's not a super great card, but it did give you a little more options for Demigra players. Wormhole is a great ability, but it's not as great of ability when you're using one of your 2 Overwhelms to play the card that's giving you Wormhole to begin with. Fu the Dark Vanisher, on the other hand, was a really powerful Overwhelm card. He's got Triple Strike, 25,000. It's not too high for a Triple Strike battle card, but that's a lot of power coming at you. Now, you did have to play 4 energy to use it, and you had to have at least 8 in your drop to Overwhelm. But his permanent says your opponent can't activate skills unless they choose a card in their hand and send it to their warp. That goes for all skills, whether it be blocker, whether it be super combos, even to negate it. But he's not really that overwhelming because you're going to play him with Overwhelm, and then he's going to leave the board and go away. So if you happen to have to warp a card, not a big deal. If they happen to get the triple strike damage off, then you'll get 3 cards to your hand. Now, if you're low on life, that's where it becomes a little bit more of a problem, but then you're going to take the initiative and just play a negate and discard warp a card because you're really not going to want to take that extra damage. It's a solid card, but I don't think it does enough to really warrant using it at this particular time to say that it's meta-worthy. Then we've got more Mira support with Mira Self-Reformation. He's a 4-cost 20,000 with Double Strike, and he's at Deflect, so you can't counterplay against him. If you had 10 or more black cards in your warp, you got to reduce the energy cost of this card in your hand by 1. So, obviously you're going to have 10 or more black cards in your warp by the time you get to 4 energy to play him. Now, he kind of functions a lot like the... what was he? A 4-cost Mira that you could Overwhelm from set... I guess it was set 4. And it would have the same ability to where you could choose a Toa, place it underneath him. If your leader was Toa or an Android, you got to play the 7-drop. But this one allowed you to play him in active mode, so you could actually attack for the double strike damage, and then play the 7-drop to be able to further your play for the turn. When in my Mira deck, or in my Toa deck rather, I should say, I run both this Mira and the old Mira because for a few different reasons. One, you can play the other one by being able to overwhelm him. This one, on the other hand, you're not overwhelming because you're hard casting him, so you can still overwhelm for that turn. So it kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility in how you can go about your turn to get the maximum amount of cards played and get the maximum usage out of your energy. Super solid card for those of you trying to rip cards out of your opponent's hand and just murder them with a card that gets way too much attack power for its own good. That card, when they're swinging at you with it, you better hope you have a negate because you're rarely going to combo out of it, and most of the time it's not even worth losing all those cards to do so. Then lastly, we had one of the most exciting cards to come out of the entire anniversary box. It was the Toa Chaos Bringer Leader. This card, I was excited about this card from the very first time they revealed it. And so many people shit on this leader because it didn't have any way that you drew cards on either side of the leader card. And I was just like, I don't know, I didn't understand it because it brought me back to the days of set 3 when I was going over my reveal videos and people were shitting over the new leaders because they untapped energy instead of drawing 2 cards. And I never understood why people thought that was terrible. Now it turns out that untapping the energy is easily a much better ability than getting to draw 2. This was kind of the same thing, where people were completely shitting all over it because it didn't draw. And while the other leaders from the older sets drew from attacking still, this one doesn't do that either. But she makes up for it with her unique abilities and the way that you can take advantage of her skills. First of all, let's look at her Awaken, which said if you 10 or more black cards in your warp, you get to draw a card, choose an energy, switch it to active, and Awaken. didn't matter what your life was at. You didn't have to worry about your opponent attacking. You didn't have to worry about taking your own cards from life. You were 100% in control of when you got to awaken with this card. It was kind of the same thing with the Zamasu leader from set 7. It no longer mattered whether or not your opponent was attacking you. It gave you a much better option against those passive-aggressive decks where your opponent doesn't ever attack you. You can't awaken because you can't take the damage. You're not getting cards because you're not taking the damage. The Toei leader didn't care. And once per turn, you got to mill the top 3 cards to look at the top 5 for a Mira or a Fu and add it to your hand. So right there, you were still getting your draw in a sense, because you're still getting the +1 card added to your hand. You're fueling your drop for Overwhelm, so you should be getting to Overwhelm every turn. Just like it's a super solid leader on not only the front side, but the back side as well, who then turns around and once per turn you got to put 3 cards from your warp back into your drop area, and to give a Mira battle card crit for the duration of the turn. Like, there's a surplus of Mira cards. And now, like, you could Overwhelm just any Mira and attack, and you're like, oh, well, I'm giving him critical. So now I don't care what I'm attacking with, because I'm going to take cards from your life, and you're also not going to get that extra card advantage either. The other ability being Activate Battle. Once per turn for 1 energy, you got to choose a card in your hand and put it in the drop area, and remove a keyword skill from one of your opponent's battle cards. Super solid ability to stand up against stuff like the Gogeta, where you're like, well, shit, I had to shuffle all my cards into my deck. I didn't happen to draw on a gate, but I've got my Toei leader that says, I'm going to take away your double strike, your triple strike, your quad strike, your whatever you want to take away from them, and that right there can save you. It's a super, super solid ability. This is a really good leader that I feel like not only does it not, you don't draw, which is, you know, yeah, you would like that extra draw, but it's already a powerful leader as is. But you also don't have to attack with this leader. So many leaders say when this card attacks, you know, draw a card or, you know, whatever. But this is one of those leaders that, like Shenron, you get your abilities without having to attack. The Frieza leaders, you don't have to attack. Cell, you didn't have to attack. This is another one of those great leaders that you don't have to attack. You're not putting extra damage onto your opponent, giving them free cards for no reason. And I feel like that's one of the reasons that made this leader super solid and makes her super competitively viable. I love the deck. I've loved the leader since the first day of reveal. Now everybody has seen the light, or the darkness in her case, and realized how good the deck is. It made the Vegeta time regulator or whatever stupid expensive, but I don't feel like that card is necessary outside of the Janemba lineup. If you're not playing against Janemba, you're not going to have to worry about milling yourself that hard to have to worry about losing the game, to need that Vegeta. Is it detrimental for the Janemba matchup? Good possibility. But from the last few big events we've had since her release, we've seen that while Janemba is still a powerful deck, the amount of variety in decks and leaders has expanded, and so Janemba isn't overwhelming top 16 anymore. It's not, you know, 6, 7, 8 Janemba decks and then whatever else. So Janemba is not as big of a threat now, but you have to get past all those Janemba decks going through rounds just to get to top as well. So while that Vegeta is necessary, it's not necessary for the deck itself to be viable. So that's going to wrap it up for the special anniversary box for Dragon Ball Super, and this will be the last episode for our history of the Dragon Ball Super mini-series. Now, I'm not opposed to doing more videos of this kind, so if you guys are interested in me doing videos on specific decks or matchups, or, you know, and I don't mean deck profiles, but like how decks function, how they work, the mindset to playing them, you know, whatever you guys can think of, let me know in the comments below. I'll probably post an actual post on the community tab as well, just to kind of gauge your guys' interest to see what you guys really want to see, but I'm not opposed to any of that. We will get on that as soon as we possibly can. I've got another Dragon Ball series that I want to work on. I've been wanting to work on it for a while, but unfortunately these videos take a lot of time to be able to do, so I haven't been able to work on those, plus the other stuff that I've got going, and then trying to get back into streaming, and it's just a lot of stuff going on all at once, though. But let me know in the comments below what kind of stuff you want to see. If you want to see more videos that are just discussion videos about the different decks and matchups and formats, and we'll try and start streaming some of that stuff as well, so we can talk directly to you guys about it in real time. But with that, though, I want to thank everybody that has supported this series along the way, been here commenting and discussing all this stuff with us. I really do appreciate you guys. We're going to go ahead and get the frig out of here, though, and we'll see you guys in the next video.